All right. So far, we've learned several different ways to solve that. Okay, just for Vivian's sake real quick, we're gonna run back through, okay? The very first way that we solved it was graphing. Okay, so I would take that, and actually I'm gonna change it here to an X, not that it matters, and I'm gonna put everything on one side, okay, and I'll change that 0 to a Y. So I literally could graph this, but I could also use my calculator to find the points of intersection or the zeros. So if I were to graph it, I would go, I would find the axis of symmetry. So that's negative b over 2a. So that's going to be, bless you, a negative 7 over 2 times 1. So basically what I'm saying is at 3.5, I have an axis of symmetry. 1, 2, 3.5. Okay, so I've got that. The other thing I can do, so that's my axis of symmetry. X is equal to 3.5. I can find the vertex. Okay, so the vertex I'm going to find by plugging in the 3.5, using my store button and plugging it back into that. Okay, so I just plug that into the calculator. And it tells me the y value, or the vertex, at 3.5, you have that. Okay, so this is my vertex. So I'm down here at approximately, and I'll just put it as low as I can go right here, 3.5 and negative 30.25. Now, in order to graph it, I would pick a point on each side of the 3.5. So I would pick a 3, and I would pick a 4. So I'm going to do second enter, go back. I'm going to change my 3.5 that I stored to a 3, hit enter, and I'm going to get a negative 30. So it's going to be just above this. I'm going to put the 4 in there for the 3. And I'm going to get a negative 30. So there's going to be my graph. Now the problem is, when I'm asking to solve it, I'm really asking for where it's going to cross my x-intercept. And I don't know based on this graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug that into my calculator, and it will graph it. And I will use my second calculate and select the 0 to find out where it crosses. Okay? So if I do that, hold on, I got to erase all this. I have x squared. If you hear that cut off, let me know, okay? X squared minus 7x minus 18, and I'm going to graph it. I'm going to have to change my window because I don't see both of it on there. I want to be able to see where it crosses. Okay, so I've got that, where it crosses.
Yeah.
So then I'm going to go second calculate, I'm going to select 0, okay, I'm going to find my little cursor. I'll do above the line because that's where I hit first when I'm reading from left to right, and then I'll do below the line. And then I'll hit enter again, and it'll give me a negative 2 right there. So I've just let it graph it exactly, you know, it crosses right there. Then I would have to do the same thing on the other side. Second calculate, go to 0, and I'll move my cursor over to get to the other side. On the other side, I would hit enter below the line first, because basically I'm telling it the section with which to find a 0 between. Okay. And I'm going to get a 9. Okay, so my answer is going to be a negative 2 and a 9, right? And that's by graphing. Negative 2 and a 9. Okay, that was the first way that we found it. The second way we found it was by factoring. So I've got 7r, I got r squared minus 7r, and I'm going to bring the 18 over. Two sets of parentheses. Okay, r, 9, and 2. The 9 would have to be negative, the 2 would have to be positive to make it work. When I solve it, I get r is equal to 9, r is equal to negative 2. Same thing, okay, negative 2 and 9. The third way that I solved is I did completing the square. Which is what you just took that quiz on. Okay, so I have r squared minus 7r. I already have the 18 on the other side, so I'll just put a blank there. But it has to go on both sides. I take half of the 7, so that's 7 over 2. I'm going to square it, so I have 49 over 4, and that's what I'm going to add on both sides. Okay, when I factor this left-hand side, I have an r, this sign, minus 7 over 2 squared, and then I'm going to add those together. Okay, 18 plus parentheses 49 divided by 4. I'm going to convert it back, and I'm going to get 121 over 4. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, so I have r minus 7 over 2 equals plus or minus, that's what some of you forgot. You forgot the minus part of that. Okay, is 11 over 2. So now I have two equations. 7 over 2 plus 11 over 2, 7 over 2 minus 11 over 2. Most of you got this part, but you forgot that part. So that's going to give me an 18 over 2, or a 9. This is going to give me a negative 4 over 2, or a negative 2. Same answer, okay? Reagan's remembering that she's one that forgot it, okay?
You want to put it in there too, because I just left it.
If
the
you,
4
if,
plus or minus.
but if it can be solved
Yeah.
out, then you have to solve it out. You can only leave it if it's under a square root, okay? So if it gives me a concrete whole number, I have to do it, okay? All right. The fourth way, which is the way that we're going to do it today, is the quadratic formula. Now here's the problem with this. Graphing doesn't always work because especially if I didn't have a graphing calculator, okay, how would I get like a 1.735 if I didn't have a graphing calculator, okay? That would be impossible. Factoring doesn't always work, okay, because you can't come up with the two things that multiply together. Completing the square, yeah, it would always work, but sometimes it's harder than other times to do, okay? Quadratic formula works every single time. Now, if I did the quadratic formula on this one, I would understand that I need to bring the 18 over. So I have r squared minus 7r minus 18 equals 0. Positioning makes the number in front of the r squared a, the number in front of the r b, and this last number c. So I have a is equal to 1, b is equal to negative 7, and c is equal to negative 18. Got that? Okay, here's the quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2a. We've already talked about this a little bit, okay? I just plug in, okay? When I plug in, I have a negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49, because I'm going to square it. Anything squared is positive. So I'm taking that number right here and I'm squaring it. Minus 4 times 1 times negative 18. Okay, so I've got that. So I can turn it over 2 times 1. I got to do the second part first, because remember I have to do multiplication and division before I do addition and subtraction. So I'm going to go ahead and add the opposite of the second number. Okay, so I'm going to go 4 times 18, because that's going to be positive, because it's a negative times a negative. 4 times 18 is going to give me 72, so I have 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 plus 72 over 2. Well, 49 plus 72 is going to give me 121. So I have 7 plus or minus the square root of 121 over 2. What's the square root of 121? 11. So I have 7 plus 11 over 2 and 7 minus 11 over 2. So that's going to give me my 9, and that's going to give me my negative 2. Works every time. Okay? Notice 4 different ways of doing the exact same thing. Sometimes they call it the quadratic equation. Okay, it just depends on the book. All right, let's do one where you can't do it the other way. 1 second. Oh, the other thing I need to tell you is this number in underneath. Okay, the number underneath the square root is called the discriminant. If that number is positive, it's going to have 2 real roots. There's going to be 2 real answers, okay? If that number is negative, it's going to have 2 imaginary answers, okay? You're going to have eyes in it. If that number is 0, you're going to have 1 answer. Okay, now that's the discriminant right there is what's underneath it. So let's do another one. All right, what about this one? X squared plus 9x minus 11 equals 0. Now, really truthfully, the temptation is I'm going to factor it. But I can't. If I try to factor, notice how it doesn't work. X, what are my choices for 11? 11 and 1, that's about it, okay? 11 and 1, is there any way for me to get 9x out of that? No, so we would have said, oh, it's prime. Well, you can't say it's prime anymore, okay? Because you literally can do this. You can work it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my quadratic formula. Now I could complete the square, I could graph it, but I'm going to use the quadratic formula. What is my A value? 1. What is my B value? 9. And what is my C value? Negative 11. Don't forget the negative part with it, okay? So I have a negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared, which is 81, minus 4 times 1 times negative 11 over 2 times 1, okay? Now, I've got to do that last part first, so that's going to give me a 44 right there, positive 44. So I have a negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 125, I believe, is right, over 2. Let me verify that, though. My brain's not fully functioning here. Okay, so I've got that. Can I take an even square root of 125? No. Okay, but I can break down 125. 125 is the same as 25 times 5. Okay, so I can turn around and go negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 25 times the square root of 5 over 2, which is rewritten as negative 9 plus or minus 5 on the square root of 5 over 2. Now, the reason why I can leave it like that is because I still got a square root there. It's not going to give me a whole number. Okay, I'm going to have that one. If I have a square root or I have an I can just leave it like that. Okay? And that's going to be my answer. Does that make sense? Okay. Oh, the discriminant is 125, which means I'm going to have 2 real roots. Negative 9 plus 5 on the square root of 5 over 2. Negative 9 minus 5 on the square root of 5 over 2. Okay, those are 2 real roots. Let's look at this one. It's not very complicated. That's all there is to it. Okay, I can't even make it complicated. Okay, it's just a matter of using that formula. Now, something like this, negative 3x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals 0. Now, this would be one that it would be way less complicated to use the quadratic formula on it, okay? Because if I was going to complete the square, I'd have to divide through by -3, factoring it. Yeah, I can do factoring on it, but it might get complicated, it might not work. So what is my A?
3,
-3. What is my B?
4,
4, and my C?
-4.
-4. Okay, then I just have to plug in. -4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 4 times -3 times -4. You with me so far? Okay, over 2 times -3. All right, -4 plus or minus. Now, look here. I've got 3 negatives. That's going to end up giving me a negative. Okay, so I have -4 times -3, which is +12. +12 times -4 is -48. So that's going to give me, when I add the +16, it's going to give me a -32 over -6. What's my discriminant? -32. That means I'm going to have 2 imaginary answers. I'm going to have an I in my answer. I know that. Okay, so I work on breaking this down. What can I multiply together to get 32? How about 16 and 2? Okay, so I have -4 plus or minus. Now I've got a negative underneath there, so I've got an I. Okay, square root of 16 times the square root of 2 over -6. So -4 plus or minus 4i on the square root of 2 over -6. Now can I reduce this? -4, -6, and 4. All can be divided by 2. So -2 plus or minus 2i on the square root of 2 over -3. Okay? That's all there is to it. Okay, I can't even make it any more complicated than that. Alright? Sometimes they ask you for the discriminant, sometimes they ask you to solve it. So there are times when all it's looking for is -32. It's looking for what's underneath the square root. So just pay attention to that. Okay, I think I'll go ahead and give you your homework then. Okay? You got about 13 minutes. There's not a whole lot here. Alright, page 357, 16 through 29, all. Okay, every one of them is using the quadratic formula. Okay? Try and memorize the quadratic formula too.